Imagine your mom watching you bleed through your clothes for days and refusing to help, then getting furious when you finally help yourself. Yeah, that actually happened. And honestly, that's not even the craziest story we're covering today. We've also got a so-called friend who physically destroys someone's expensive meal as a joke, a husband who dumps his kids at a widow's house during her darkest hour, and a guy who faked being broke for decades just to avoid his greedy family. Story number 3, it's going to make your jaw drop. Hey everyone, welcome back to AITAH Chronicles. If you're new here, this is where we dive into the most jaw-dropping, infuriating, and sometimes hilarious Am I the Asshole stories from Reddit. Real people, real drama, real moral dilemmas that'll have you picking sides before you even realize it. I'm not going to lie, some of these stories today had me pausing mid-read just to process the audacity. Like, I had to walk away from my screen a couple times because I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I have a feeling you're going to have the same reaction. Real quick before we jump in, we're on a mission to hit 10,000 subscribers. And honestly, we're so close. I can taste it. If you love this kind of content, do me a huge favor and smash that subscribe button. And if a story today makes you go, "What?" out loud, hit that like button so I know which ones really got you. Trust me, your reactions fuel these videos. All right. Enough from me. Let's get into the chaos. We're starting strong with what's going to make you question everything about basic human decency. Am I the asshole for driving myself to get pads? All right, folks, strap in because today's Am I the Asshole post is about to make you question everything you thought you knew about basic human decency. We've got an 18-year-old dealing with a mother who apparently thinks feminine hygiene products are a luxury item that can wait. Spoiler alert, they cannot wait. They really, really cannot wait. So our writer, who's 18, goes on this trip with her mom. Sounds nice, right? Mother-daughter bonding time, couple weeks in an Airbnb, probably scrolling through local coffee shops on Instagram, living that vacation life. Now, here's where we need some context, and I'm going to be real with you. This part is actually super important. Our writer has been on birth control since she was 15 because her periods were basically the definition of hell. We're talking irregular, painful, and heavy. Like the kind of periods that make you question why the human body would design itself this way. And honestly, birth control for period management is so valid. She hasn't had her period in years because of it, which good for her, honestly. But then, and this is where the universe to play the coolest prank possible, her birth control just stops working mid-trip in an unfamiliar place. She's taking it consistently, doing everything right, and her body just said, "Lol, no, here's your period anyway." If that's not a horror story, I don't know what is. Now put yourself in her shoes for a second. You haven't had a period in years. You're not prepared. You don't have pain meds. You don't have pads. You don't have tampons. Nothing. Nada. Zilch. And you're bleeding. This is literally a medical necessity situation, not a, "oh, I'll grab it when I feel like it" situation. So she does what any reasonable person would do. She asks her mom to drive her to get pads. They're not in walking distance of stores, and she's not comfortable walking alone in a neighborhood she doesn't know. That's smart. That's safe thinking. And what does mom say? "We'll go later." Later. Later. My friends, later is not an appropriate response when someone is actively bleeding through their underwear. This isn't like, "Hey, can we stop by Starbucks later?" This is a biological emergency. By the next day, this girl has bled through multiple pairs of underwear. Multiple. Can we just acknowledge how uncomfortable and honestly degrading that must feel? She asks again. Mom's response? "I'll go when I have time." When she has time? What exactly was mom doing that was more important than a 10-minute trip to get basic hygiene products for her daughter? Was she negotiating world peace, discovering the cure for cancer? Binge watching Netflix? Because unless it's one of the first two, I'm not seeing how this takes priority. Our writer then asks if she can just drive herself. Reasonable request, right? She's 18. She's legal to drive, but mom says no. And okay, I'll give mom this tiny sliver of credit. Her reasoning isn't completely unreasonable. The writer is a young driver. It's not her car. They're in an unfamiliar area. From a pure safety standpoint, I can see where mom is coming from. I can see it. I don't agree with it in this context, but I can see it. But here's the thing. If you're going to say, no, you can't drive yourself, then you need to step up and handle it. You don't just get to veto someone's solution without providing your own. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So now our writer is stuck. She's bleeding, she's ruining her underwear, she's uncomfortable, probably cramping if her period history is anything to go by, and she's essentially a prisoner to her mom's schedule. She reminds her mom multiple times over the next few days. Days, people. Days. Even after washing her underwear, it's stained and gross and basically unusable. She's trying to make do with toilet paper as a makeshift pad, which, if you've ever had a period, you know that's about as effective as using a paper towel to stop a waterfall. Let me paint you a picture of how desperate this situation is. Imagine bleeding through your clothes, having to wash your underwear in an Airbnb sink, watching the stains set in because blood is notoriously difficult to get out, and then having to either commando or wear stained underwear because you've run out of clean options. And the whole time, the person who could help you is just not helping for days. This is actual torture. Finally, our writer reaches her breaking point. Her mom goes out and she makes a decision. She takes the car, drives to the nearest convenience store. We're talking a 10-minute drive, not a cross-country road trip, and gets what she needs. She even sends her mom a text before leaving saying, "Hey, I'm grabbing the pads, don't worry about it." That's communication. That's being responsible. That's letting someone know where you are and what you're doing. But when she gets back, mom is waiting and she is pissed. Capital P, multiple exclamation points, probably that vein popping out of her forehead kind of pissed. Mom says she told her she wasn't allowed to use the car. And yeah, technically she did say that. But our writer fires back with the most valid point in the history of valid points. I had no other way to get to the store. Mom pulls out the classic, "I would have gone and gotten what you needed." Oh, really, Karen? Because you had days to do exactly that, and you didn't. You were asked multiple times. You were reminded. You watched your daughter bleed through her clothes and said, later. At what point were you planning to actually follow through? When she developed toxic shock syndrome? When she ran completely out of underwear? When pigs flew? Let's be crystal clear here. This wasn't a situation where the writer asked once and then immediately went rogue. This was days of asking, waiting, suffering, and being told later over and over again. This was trying to respect her mom's rules while also dealing with a legitimate health situation. This was being as patient as humanly possible when every fiber of her being was probably screaming, "I need pads right now." And can we talk about the power dynamic here for a second? This is an 18-year-old adult who is being denied basic autonomy over her own body and health needs. Yes, it's mom's car. Yes, they're in an unfamiliar area, but we're not talking about joyriding or going to a party. We're talking about accessing menstrual products. This is healthcare. This is not optional. The fact that mom would rather flex her authority over the car than ensure her daughter has what she needs to manage her period is honestly kind of disturbing. Like, what message does that send? Your bodily autonomy matters less than my rules about who drives my car. That's not parenting. That's a control issue. And let's talk about 10-minute drive. 10 minutes. It's not like she drove to another state. She didn't take the car on some elaborate adventure. She went to the nearest convenience store, grabbed pads, and came right back. If anything, that shows incredible restraint and responsibility. A lesser person might have been tempted to make a few extra stops out of spite. Oh, I'm already out. Might as well grab coffee and maybe do some shopping, perhaps catch a movie. But no, she got what she needed and came back. Some of you might be thinking, but she's 18. Couldn't she have called an Uber or something? And sure, maybe if she had the money and if Ubers were readily available in this area. But why should she have to spend money on a ride when there's a perfectly good car sitting there and she's a licensed driver? Why should she have to jump through extra hoops for something that should have been handled days ago? The truth is, her mom created this situation. By repeatedly saying later and then refusing to let her daughter solve the problem herself, mom backed her into a corner where the only reasonable option was to just do it. What was the alternative? continue bleeding through her clothes indefinitely, fashion some sort of medieval period solution out of Airbnb towels, prayed the bleeding would just stop. So here's my verdict, and I'm not going to beat around the bush because that's not what we do here. No, no, no. You are not the asshole. Not even a little bit, not even 0.01%. You are so far from being the asshole that you're in a completely different zip code from asshole territory. Your mom, your mom is the asshole, like astronomically, spectacularly the asshole. She had multiple opportunities to help you. She acknowledged your need, and then she just didn't follow through for days while you were actively suffering. That's neglectful at worst and incredibly inconsiderate at best. And then to have the audacity to be angry when you solve the problem yourself, after explicitly preventing you from solving it earlier, that's not reasonable parenting. That's a power trip. She wanted to control when and how you got help, even if that meant you suffered longer than necessary. You didn't have much choice. Actually, scratch that. You had no choice. You did everything right. You asked politely, you waited, you reminded her. You were patient way longer than anyone should have to be in that situation. You even communicated with her before you left. You followed every rule of being a responsible person except the one arbitrary rule that was actively harming you. I really hope your mom reflects on this and realizes how messed up this whole situation was. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about the car or driving rules or respect or whatever she wants to frame it as. This was about basic human dignity and health needs, and she failed that test spectacularly. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, if you need menstrual products, do what you need to do to get them. Period. No pun intended. Your health and dignity are not negotiable, and they're certainly not worth less than someone else's need for control. Not the asshole. Not even close. Am I the asshole for walking out of the restaurant and leaving my friend? Okay, y'all, settle in because today's post from r/am I the asshole is about to have us discussing friendship dynamics, food photography, and the absolute nerve some people have. We've got a girl who just wanted to take a cute picture of her meal, a friend who decided to be the food police, and a dramatic walkout that left everyone stranded. Let's unpack this mess. So our writer went out to eat with her girlfriends 2 days ago, and she was the designated driver, already doing the Lord's work by being the DD, which means she's probably not even drinking and is just there to have a good time with her friends and eat some good food. Respect. They all sit down, everyone orders their meals, normal restaurant experience so far. Everything's going fine. The vibes are good. Just girls having dinner together. The food arrives and our writer is excited because her plate looks absolutely gorgeous. Like the restaurant really did their thing with the presentation. She wants to take a picture of it, which, by the way, is completely normal behavior in 2024. We all take pictures of our food. Your mom takes pictures of her food. Your grandma probably takes pictures of her food. It's what we do now. She's about to take the picture, phone out, probably trying to get the right angle and lighting because we all know restaurant lighting can be tricky. And before she can even snap the photo, one of her friends reaches over with her fork and stirs up the food. I'm sorry. What? She put her fork in someone else's plate and just destroyed the presentation? Who does that? That's not your food. Those are not your mashed potatoes to stir. That is not your gravy to mix around. The audacity is absolutely unhinged. Our writer obviously gets upset because, yeah, that's upsetting, and asks her friend why she would do that. And this is where it gets even worse. The friend tells her it was cringe to take pictures of food. Oh, so you're the cringe police now? You're out here enforcing what's socially acceptable at dinner? You really thought you did something by messing up someone else's meal to prove a point about what you think is cringe? Let me tell you what's actually cringe. Touching someone else's food without permission. Thinking your opinion about food photography matters more than someone else's happiness. Being so bothered by someone taking a 2-second photo that you literally sabotage their meal. That's cringe. Our writer looks around at the other girls at the table and she can tell they're uncomfortable. Like, they know what just happened was weird and wrong. They can feel the tension. They're probably sitting there like, oh no, this is awkward, someone should say something. But does anyone stand up for her? Does anyone tell the fork-wielding food terrorist that she's out of line? Nope, not a single person. They all just sit there in awkward silence while our writer is sitting with her ruined meal that she can't even photograph anymore. So she's upset, she's hurt, her friends aren't backing her up, and she makes a decision. She walks out of the restaurant and drives home, leaving all of them behind. And honestly, I cannot even blame her for that impulse. Sometimes when you're upset and feeling ganged up on or unsupported, you just need to remove yourself from the situation. Fight or flight kicked in and she chose flight, literally. When she gets home, she asks who paid for her meal and immediately zells them the cost. So she's not even trying to dine and dash or stick someone with her bill. She's handling her financial responsibility even though she's upset. That's pretty mature, actually. But then her friends start texting her and they're all saying it was just a joke, which is what people always say when they do something mean and get called out for it. It's just a joke is the international language for I did something wrong, but I don't want to take accountability for it. They tell her what she did was immature and that it was wrong of her to leave them behind considering she was the driver. Hold on. Let's pause here. They're calling her immature? The person who had her food vandalized and then calmly left and paid for her meal is immature? But the person who stuck her fork in someone else's food to make a point about photo taking isn't immature? Make it make sense. And yes, leaving your friends without a ride is not ideal. That's definitely not great. But also, maybe don't mess with the driver's food. Maybe don't let your friend get disrespected and then expect her to chauffeur you around. Just a thought. Our writer admits she feels like she might have overreacted, but she also feels like what her friend did was mean. And you know what? Both things can be true. You can have overreacted a little bit and been justified in being upset. Those aren't mutually exclusive. But then we get to the edit, and oh boy, does this add some important context. First of all, she did tell her friends she was leaving. She said, I don't want to be here anymore, and then left. So it's not like she just vanished into thin air without warning. She communicated that she was done and bounced. That's actually way more mature than just storming out silently. Second, and this is where I actually gasped, let's talk about what her meal was. This wasn't some basic plate of spaghetti or a burger and fries. Her meal was steak, gravy, mash, caviar, and it had a hibiscus plant on it. A hibiscus plant. This was clearly a fancy, expensive, beautifully plated meal at what sounds like a nice restaurant. The presentation was obviously intentional and artistic. This wasn't a random Tuesday at Applebee's. No shade to Applebee's. This was a moment. This was an experience. And her friend really looked at this gorgeous, carefully crafted plate with an actual decorative flower on it and thought, yeah, I'm going to stick my fork in there and mess it up because I think taking pictures of food is cringe. The disrespect, the lack of boundaries, the sheer audacity. Imagine being the chef who carefully plated this meal, artfully arranged the mashed potatoes, perfectly positioned the hibiscus, made sure everything looked magazine-worthy, and then some random girl just stabs her fork in there and swirls it around because her friend wanted to take a picture. I would be devastated. The edit also clarifies that the girls who didn't stand up for her laughed at the situation awkwardly. They were uncomfortable. She could tell they knew it was wrong, but they didn't say a word. They just sat there and nervously laughed while their friend was being disrespected. And that's honestly the part that hurts the most, right? It's not even just one girl who stirred the food. It's all the other friends who witnessed something mean happening and chose to stay silent. That's a special kind of betrayal. When your friends see you being treated badly and decide their comfort is more important than standing up for you, that stings. The person who paid for her meal wasn't even the fork criminal. It was one of the girls who laughed. So that girl paid for the meal, watched her friend get disrespected, nervously laughed about it, and then had the audacity to text later about how our writer was immature for leaving. And here's another important detail from the edit. Our writer was only trying to take a picture of her plate. She wasn't making everyone wait to eat. She wasn't doing a whole photo shoot with props and different angles. She wasn't holding up the meal or being annoying about it. She literally just wanted one picture of her beautiful plate before she ate it. That's it. a 5-second activity that impacts nobody else at the table. But her friend decided that those 5 seconds were too cringe to tolerate and took it upon herself to sabotage the photo opportunity by physically destroying the presentation. Let's talk about why this bothers me so much. First of all, touching someone else's food without permission is a violation. I don't care if you're friends. I don't care if you think it's funny. I don't care what your justification is. That plate is not yours. That food was paid for by someone else. You don't get to touch it unless you're invited to. This is basic respect and boundaries that we teach toddlers. Second, the "it's cringe" excuse is so weak. You know what's actually cringe? Being so insecure about what other people think that you can't let your friend enjoy something harmless. Being so worried about appearing cool that you'll hurt someone's feelings over a photograph. That's cringe. Taking pictures of pretty food is just normal. It's what people do. It's how we share experiences. It's literally so common that restaurants design their plates to be Instagram worthy now. Third, the "it was just a joke" defense is infuriating. Jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone involved. If one person is upset and hurt, it's not a joke. It's just being mean and then trying to avoid consequences. A real friend would have immediately apologized when they saw our writer was genuinely upset, not doubled down and insisted it was just humor. And let's address the designated driver situation because her friends really tried to make this a big deal. Yes, it sucks to be left without a ride. Yes, that's inconvenient, and they probably had to call an Uber or figure out alternative transportation. But you know what else sucks? Having your food messed with, having your feelings dismissed, having none of your friends stand up for you when someone crosses a line. They're acting like she committed some huge betrayal by leaving, but they betrayed her first by allowing that behavior and then minimizing her feelings about it. The driver thing is a consequence of their own actions. If you want your designated driver friend to actually drive you home, maybe don't let people disrespect her and then call her cringe. Just a thought. Also, they're all adults, right? They can figure out how to get home. It's not like she left a bunch of teenagers stranded in a dangerous area at 3 a.m. They're grown women at a restaurant who have phones and can call a ride. They'll survive. I keep coming back to the fact that multiple friends saw what happened and said nothing. That's not one bad friend having an off day. That's a whole friend group that doesn't have your back. That's a group dynamic where it's apparently okay to let one person be the target of mean behavior as long as everyone else can avoid confrontation. Those awkward laughs, that silence, that's compliance. When you witness something wrong and you don't speak up, you're essentially saying it's okay. You're telling the person being hurt that keeping the peace is more important than their feelings. And that's a really crappy thing to do to someone you supposedly care about. Now, did our writer handle this perfectly? No, probably not. Walking out and leaving everyone without a ride is a pretty dramatic response. There were other options. She could have finished her meal and had a conversation with them about boundaries. She could have called out the friend directly and demanded an apology. She could have stuck it out and then addressed it later in a calmer moment. But you know what? Sometimes when you're hurt and angry and feeling ganged up on, you don't make the most measured decision. Sometimes you just need to get out of a situation that feels bad. And she did communicate that she was leaving. She didn't just ghost them. She said she didn't want to be there anymore and then left. That's actually pretty clear communication. And the fact that she immediately paid for her meal shows she wasn't trying to be vindictive or stick them with her bill. She handled her financial responsibility even in the middle of being upset. That's actually more mature than a lot of people would be in that situation. Her friends are focusing on the wrong thing. They're mad about the inconvenience of finding a ride home instead of examining why their friend felt so disrespected that she needed to leave. They're calling her immature for walking out instead of calling out the friend who stirred up her food for being inappropriate and crossing boundaries. The priorities are completely backwards here. Here's my verdict, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. No, you are not the asshole. Was walking out ideal? Probably not. Was leaving your friends without their planned ride home a bit much? Maybe. But were you justified in being upset and removing yourself from a situation where you felt disrespected and unsupported? Absolutely yes. Your friend crossed a major boundary by touching your food without permission. She did it specifically to mess with you and prove some weird point about her personal opinions on food photography. When you got upset, which is a completely valid response, she dismissed your feelings by calling it a joke and saying you're cringe. And then not one of your other friends stood up for you. They all just sat there awkwardly, maybe uncomfortable, but ultimately silent while you were being treated badly. That's not what friends do. Friends have your back. Friends call out bad behavior even when it's awkward. Friends don't let other friends get disrespected without saying something. You communicated that you were leaving. You paid for your meal. You didn't cause a huge scene or make a spectacle. You just removed yourself from a situation that felt bad and went home. That's actually a pretty reasonable response to feeling hurt and unsupported. Your friends calling you immature while defending or excusing the person who literally sabotaged your meal is wild. The cognitive dissonance is absolutely bonkers. They want you to be understanding about a joke that hurt your feelings, but they can't understand why you'd be upset enough to leave. Make it make sense. And honestly, the fact that they're more concerned about the ride situation than about your feelings tells you everything you need to know about where their priorities are. They're not upset that you were hurt. They're upset that they were inconvenienced. These friends owe you an apology. The fork criminal especially owes you an apology. And they all need to do some reflecting on what it means to actually support your friends instead of just going along with whoever's being the loudest or most aggressive in the moment. Stand your ground. You didn't overreact. You set a boundary and removed yourself from a disrespectful situation. That's actually healthy and mature, even if it didn't feel convenient for everyone else. Not the asshole. Not even a little bit. Am I the asshole for dropping my kids off with my wife when she is with a grieving friend? All right, everyone, strap in because today's post from r/am I the asshole is absolutely bonkers. We've got a husband, a grieving widow, 2 kids, and the worst decision-making skills I've seen in a minute. Let's get into it. So our writer starts by telling us that his wife's best friend, who we'll call Jessie, lost her husband about a month ago. And okay, right off the bat, that's heavy, like genuinely devastating. Losing your spouse is literally one of the most traumatic things a person can go through. And a month? That's nothing. That's barely enough time to figure out how to exist without that person, let alone actually process the grief. But here's where our story takes a turn. The writer says his wife has been at Jesse's home almost every single day since the husband died. Now, his wife is being a good friend here, like genuinely supporting someone through the absolute worst time of their life. That's what real friends do. They show up, they sit in the uncomfortable silence, they make sure their person eats something and doesn't completely fall apart. So, props to the wife for actually being there because let's be real, a lot of people say, let me know if you need anything, and then vanish into thin air. The writer goes on to explain that he works a job where he's on call some nights, and because money is tight, he can't just opt out of being on call. Which, like, okay, I get it. The economy is in shambles, rent is astronomical, groceries cost your firstborn child these days. So turning down work isn't really an option. Fair enough. We're all just trying to survive out here. But then he says, and I quote, he's basically a single parent because his wife is never home. Hold up. Let's pump the brakes for a second here. Your wife is helping her best friend through one of the darkest moments of human existence, and you're really comparing yourself to an actual single parent? My guy. Single parents don't have a co-parent who's literally still alive and married to them, just temporarily occupied with preventing their best friend from drowning in grief. The math ain't mathing. He continues by saying he knows Jesse is struggling. Oh, how generous of you to acknowledge that. But it's stressing him out a ton to have all this parenting responsibility. He's talked to his wife about cutting back on the time she spends with Jesse, but apparently those conversations end in arguments about him being heartless. And honestly, I'm starting to see where the wife is coming from because we haven't even gotten to the main event yet, and I'm already sensing some serious empathy deficit here. So yesterday, this is where it gets absolutely wild. The writer gets called in for work. Emergency situation, gotta go immediately, no wiggle room. He's got 2 daughters, ages 6 and 9, and obviously he can't leave them home alone because that's illegal and also just terrible parenting, and they're literal children who still need help with basic life functions. So he does what any reasonable person would do and calls his wife. He tells her she needs to head home now because he has to leave for work, and she says no. She tells him to figure it out. Now, look, I'm going to keep it real with you. That's not the best response. Like, as a co parent, you can't just completely check out when your partner has a genuine emergency. That's not how the whole partnership thing works. They've got 2 whole kids together, and responsibilities don't just disappear because you're helping someone else. So the wife isn't completely in the clear here for that response. But, and this is a huge but, what our writer does next is so absolutely unhinged that I genuinely had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. He runs through his options real quick. Can't afford a babysitter because they already established they're broke. His parents live too far away to help, which, okay, geography is a thing. Her parents aren't allowed near the kids because apparently they suck. And there's definitely a story there that we're not getting. Maybe that's a whole other Reddit post we're missing out on. And his friends all have their own lives and families, so that's out too. So with all these options exhausted, does he call his work and explain the emergency? Does he problem solve for more than 30 seconds? Does he use even a single brain cell? No. This man packs up his 6 and 9-year-old daughters, drives them past his workplace apparently, and drops them off at Jesse's house. At the grieving widow's house. The house where a woman is actively trying to process the fact that her husband is dead and never coming back. He just shows up with 2 elementary schoolers like he's dropping off a DoorDash order. I need everyone to really sit with how absolutely wild this is. This woman's husband has been dead for 4 weeks. She's probably still finding his clothes in the closet and breaking down. She's probably still getting mail addressed to him. She's probably waking up every morning and forgetting for half a second that he's gone and then remembering all over again. And this dude really pulled up like, hey, I know you're going through literally the worst thing ever, but can you watch my kids real quick? Thanks. The audacity, the absolute nerve of this man. Like, imagine being Jesse in this scenario. You're having the worst month of your entire life. Your best friend is over helping you figure out how to even continue existing. And then her husband shows up with 2 children and is basically like, surprise, free childcare, as if a house of mourning is the ideal place for a play date. Obviously, and I really hope this goes without saying, his wife was absolutely pissed, like furious, big mad, and rightfully so. When he got back from work, they had a massive argument, and this is where our writer really shows his whole entire personality. He tells her that she actually needs to be a parent, because apparently helping a grieving widow means you've forgotten how to parent. He says he's very sick of her playing house at Jesse's house, and that they have their own kids to worry about. Playing house. He called supporting a widow through fresh grief playing house. Like, she's over there having some fun little pretend tea party and not, literally keeping another human being alive through the most traumatic experience of her life. Like, she's just hanging out for funsies and not performing actual emotional labor to prevent her best friend from completely falling apart. The lack of empathy is actually breathtaking. Like, I'm genuinely amazed at how someone can be this emotionally dense. It's almost impressive in the worst possible way. His wife called him a heartless fucking man. And you know what? Where's the lie, though? Like, she really looked at him and said, you are heartless, and he's here asking if he's wrong. Buddy, she's giving you the answer right there. He told her to be a parent to our own kids, completely missing the entire point that teaching your children about compassion, loyalty, and showing up for people in crisis is actually excellent parenting. Like, what lesson are the kids learning here? That when someone is suffering, we only help if it's convenient for us. That friendships have a time limit on support. That empathy is optional. Here's the thing that's really getting me about this whole situation. Nobody is saying the writer's concerns are completely invalid. Like, yes, having your partner gone every single day while you handle all the parenting solo is exhausting. Yes, they need to have a conversation about balance and making sure their own family needs are met. Yes, the wife probably should have been more responsive when he had a genuine work emergency. These are real issues that real couples need to navigate. But dropping your kids off at a grief house as some kind of petty revenge move, that's not communicating your needs. That's not problem solving. That's just being spiteful and frankly cruel, not just to your wife, but to Jessie, who did absolutely nothing to deserve having children dumped on her doorstep while she's trying to process widowhood. And can we talk about how he couldn't think of any other solution? Like none? Not one? He couldn't call his boss and explain he had a childcare emergency, couldn't bring the kids to work and have them hang in a break room or office for a bit while he figured something out, couldn't reach out to neighbors or any other parents from the kids' school, couldn't literally do anything other than the most dramatic and hurtful option possible. Because let's be real, he didn't drop those kids off because it was his only option. He dropped them off to prove a point, to make his wife feel guilty, to punish her for not coming home when he demanded it. This was a power move disguised as desperation, and it's so transparent, it's practically glass. The playing house comment really reveals what he actually thinks about his wife's compassion. He doesn't see her as being a good friend and a caring person. He sees her choosing someone else over him, like this is some kind of competition for her attention. Like Jesse's grief is somehow a personal attack on his convenience. And here's what really gets me. A month is nothing in grief terms. Like we're not talking about years of his wife being gone every day. We're talking about 4 weeks of intensive support during the absolute worst phase of loss, the phase where you're still in shock, the phase where the reality hasn't even fully hit yet, the phase where everyone else starts going back to their normal lives, but yours is permanently destroyed and you have no idea how to build a new one. That's when people need support the most. Not 6 months later when everyone expects you to be over it. Not a year later when people stop asking how you're doing. Right now, in the immediate aftermath, when everything is raw and overwhelming and unbearable. And his wife gets that. She understands that this is when Jesse needs her most. But our writer here is so focused on his own inconvenience that he can't see past his own nose. He's so wrapped up in feeling like a victim that he's completely missing the fact that his wife is doing something genuinely beautiful and important. She's showing their daughters what real friendship looks like, what loyalty means, what it means to show up for people even when it's hard and inconvenient. Also, let's not skip past the fact that he could have handled this work situation so many other ways. He could have had a calm conversation with his wife days or weeks ago about needing a solid backup plan for when he gets called in. He could have said, hey, I love that you're supporting Jesse, but we need to make sure we have childcare covered for my on-call shifts. Can we work out a schedule or find a backup person? But no. Instead, he waited until there was an emergency and then used it as ammunition. That's not communication. That's setting someone up to fail so you can be right. And you know what's really sad? This whole situation could have been avoided with some basic communication and empathy. If they'd sat down together and talked about how to balance supporting Jesse with managing their own family, they probably could have figured something out. Maybe the wife could have been home for certain nights when he's on call. Maybe they could have found a neighbor willing to be on emergency backup. Maybe they could have talked to his work about having a little flexibility during this temporary situation. But instead, he chose chaos. He chose to make a scene. He chose to hurt not just his wife, but also a grieving widow who literally did nothing wrong except have a good friend. So here's my verdict, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. Yes, you are absolutely the asshole. You're the asshole for treating your wife's compassion like it's a character flaw instead of one of her best qualities. You're the asshole for dropping your kids off at a house of mourning like you're making some kind of statement instead of recognizing how absolutely inappropriate and hurtful that is. You're the asshole for calling genuine grief support playing house, like it's some kind of fun hobby and not emotionally exhausting work. You're the asshole for not having a single adult conversation about creating a sustainable plan that works for everyone. And you're the asshole for weaponizing your children and your work emergency instead of actually trying to solve the problem. Is your wife perfect in this situation? No, she should have been more responsive to your work emergency, and you two definitely need to communicate better about balancing everything. But but you went full nuclear option when you could have gone literally any other direction. You chose the most hurtful, dramatic, and frankly manipulative response possible. Do better, my guy. Seriously. Am I the asshole for telling my sister-in-law to walk her daughter to school? Okay, so today we're diving into a post from r/am the asshole that has me absolutely scratching my head because the audacity levels here are off the charts. We've got a 23-year-old woman who's just trying to live her life, a sister-in-law who apparently thinks walking 15 minutes is equivalent to climbing Mount Everest, and family drama that's honestly wild. Let's break this down. So, our writer is a 23-year-old university graduate who lives at home with her mom. And before anyone jumps in with the still living with your parents jokes, let me just say, this girl is doing it right. She's paying rent, doing most of the housework, and working in healthcare, which is already exhausting enough without adding family drama to the mix. Her mom owns the house outright, mortgage fully paid off, which is honestly goals in this economy. The writer pays about half the market rate for rent in their area, which seems like a fair deal for everyone involved. She's contributing, she's adulting, she's got her life together. She works in healthcare with irregular shift patterns, which anyone who's ever worked healthcare knows means your schedule is absolutely chaotic. Sometimes you're working nights, sometimes early mornings, sometimes you're awake for 24 hours straight wondering why you chose this profession. It's unpredictable and demanding. Uh, Her mom is self-employed and occasionally travels for work, so they're both busy people just trying to make it work. Now, here's where things get interesting. Her brother, who's 31, so a whole 8 years older than her, his wife Rose, who's also 31, and their 6-year-old daughter all moved back into their mom's house on Friday. And okay, let's talk about why they moved back, because honestly, I feel for them on this part. They bought a house with a mortgage, which is hard enough to do these days, and it turned out to have a ton of maintenance issues. Their toilet doesn't work, their shower doesn't work, and their heating is broken. Like, those are the big 3, right? You literally need those things to function as a human being. Can't really live in a house where you can't use the bathroom or shower, and with heating broken too. That's rough. It's apparently gonna take at least a month to fix everything, so they're staying at mom's house in the meantime. So far, this all seems reasonable. Family helps family, things happen, houses have issues, whatever. This is what family is for. But then Rose comes to our writer with a request. She asks if the writer can take their 6-year-old daughter to school every day because the school is a 5-minute drive from the hospital where she works. Normally, their neighbor takes the daughter to school. The neighbor has a kid the same age, so it was probably a carpool situation. But now that they've moved temporarily, that's no longer an option. The brother works full-time starting at 7 in the morning, so he can't do school drop-off, which needs to happen at 8. And here's the kicker. Rose only works 1 shift a week. 1. A single shift on Sundays. Let that sink in for a second. Rose works 1 day a week, and she's asking her sister-in-law, who works full-time in healthcare with crazy irregular hours, to commit to daily school drop-offs. Our writer very reasonably tells Rose that she can't commit to taking her niece to school every single day. And her reasoning makes total sense. Sometimes she's working overnight shifts that don't finish until 9 or 10 in the morning. So, like, what's she supposed to do? Leave work mid-shift to drop a kid off at school? Sometimes her shifts start really early in the morning, probably before school drop-off would even happen. Uh, this is completely logical. This is a very reasonable boundary to set. She's not saying, I hate your kid and never want to help. She's saying, I literally cannot commit to this because of my work schedule. But Rose gets upset. She asks why the writer can't just explain to her boss that she needs to be available for school drop-off. Excuse me. What? Girl, that's not how jobs work. That's especially not how healthcare jobs work. You don't just waltz up to your hospital supervisor and go, "Hey, I know we're short-staffed and people are literally dying, but I need to only work shifts that accommodate my niece's school schedule. Like, do you want her to get fired? Because that's how you get fired." Rose didn't even wait for an answer, which honestly tells you she knows it's unreasonable and just said she knows it's not that simple, but she needs the writer to help her. And here's where I'm like, ma'am, you know it's not that simple. You know you're asking something unreasonable, like, but you're still asking it and getting upset when the answer is no. That's manipulative behavior right there. That's the, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to make you feel bad about it anyway move. Our writer very sensibly points out that in her job, if you start requesting restricted availability, they just give you way less shifts, which again makes perfect sense. Healthcare is already understaffed everywhere. They need people who can work flexible schedules. If you suddenly become unavailable during key times, they're just going to schedule other people instead. That's not mean. That's just how scheduling works when you need 24/7 coverage. So our writer is confused about why Rose can't just walk her daughter to school. And honestly, same. Because get this, it's a 15-minute walk from their mom's house to the school. 15 minutes with no hills and plenty of safe crossings. Neither Rose nor the daughter have any health conditions that would make this difficult. They're both perfectly capable of walking. It's not like we're talking about someone with mobility issues or a child with a disability, just two able-bodied people and a very manageable 15-minute walk. The writer asks Rose why she won't walk her daughter to school, and Rose says, and I truly cannot believe this is a real answer, that it's too far to walk with a young child. Too far. 15 minutes. Too far. I need everyone to really absorb how absolutely ridiculous this is. 15 minutes of walking is too much? Kids walk farther than that at recess. Kids walk around entire malls for hours. 15 minutes is literally nothing. Our writer, probably thinking Rose just doesn't realize how close it actually is, shows her the distance on Google Maps. Like, hey, look, it's really not that far, see? Being all helpful and trying to clear up what she assumes is a misunderstanding. And Rose looks at the map, sees the actual distance, and says again that it's too far. So it's not a misunderstanding. Rose full is 15 minutes, and she's decided that's just too much for her, which is absolutely wild because what is she going to do when they move back into their own house? Their neighbor was doing drop-offs before, so what happens if that neighbor moves or can't do it anymore? Is she just never going to walk her kid anywhere? The writer tells Rose that walking seems like her best option, but she cannot commit to taking her daughter to school every day, which is completely reasonable. She's not being mean. She's not saying Rose is lazy, even though, I mean, she's just stating a fact about her own availability. Later that day, the mom tells our writer that Rose came to her really upset that the writer refused to help. Oh, here we go. Rose is doing the whole I'm going to go cry to mom so she makes you do what I want routine. Very mature, very adult. Definitely the behavior of a 31-year-old woman and not a toddler who didn't get candy at the store. The mom says she knows the writer normally works irregular shifts, but it would be a really nice thing to do. And okay, I get that mom is trying to keep the peace here, but also, mom, come on. You know this is unreasonable. You walked this same route with your daughter when she was a kid. You know it's perfectly doable. Our writer is feeling like she's going crazy because, and this is the best part, when she was a kid, she went to the same school and her mom walked her there and back from this exact house. So the mom literally has personal experience walking this route with a child and knows for a fact that it's totally fine and doable. And she's still trying to guilt trip her daughter into upending her work schedule? Make it make sense. The writer said no, and thankfully her mom backed off and said, that's fine. I understand. So at least mom isn't completely unreasonable, even if she did try the guilt trip first. But now, because of course it gets worse, the brother is calling our writer selfish. He's saying it's a small ask and that even their neighbor could do it, so why can't she? Oh, buddy, my guy, my dude. Let's break down why this logic is absolutely nonsense. First of all, their neighbor probably has a consistent schedule that allows for school drop-off. The neighbor probably doesn't work overnight shifts in healthcare. The neighbor probably wasn't doing it out of the goodness of their heart either. They were taking their own kid to school and just bringing the niece along. That's completely different from asking someone to rearrange their entire work schedule. Second, it's not a small ask. Asking someone to commit to daily school drop-offs when they work irregular healthcare shifts is actually a huge ask. It's asking her to potentially jeopardize her job, her income, her career advancement, all so that his wife doesn't have to walk for 15 minutes. Third, and this is the part that really gets me, he's got some audacity calling his little sister selfish when he and his wife are the ones who moved into their mom's house and are now making demands about childcare. Like, sir, you are both 31 years old with a child. You chose to have that child. Your sister did not. Your child's and your childcare is not her responsibility, especially when there's a perfectly reasonable solution right there that just requires your wife to put on some shoes. Let's also talk about what Rose is modeling for her daughter here. She's teaching her 6-year-old that walking 15 minutes is impossible and unreasonable. That's wild. Kids should be learning that walking is normal and healthy and perfectly fine. Instead, this kid is learning that any physical effort is something to be avoided. And that's honestly kind of sad. Walking to school is actually really good for kids. It's exercise. It's fresh air. It's time to wake up and transition from home to school mode. In a lot of places, kids walk way farther than 15 minutes to get to school. Some kids walk for like half an hour or more, and they're fine. They survive. They actually benefit from it. But Rose has apparently decided that 15 minutes is some kind of marathon distance that cannot possibly be expected of her or her child. And she's recruiting the whole family to back her up on this absolutely bananas position. And can we acknowledge that Rose works 1 day a week? One. What is she doing the other 6 days that's so important she can't walk her kid to school? I'm not trying to shame stay-at-home parents or people who work part-time. That's totally valid. But if you're home most of the week and you're staying in someone else's house rent-free, I'm assuming, since it wasn't mentioned that they're paying the mom, maybe you can handle the 15-minute school walk? The brother and Rose share one car, which Rose has access to 6 days a week since the brother only needs it for work. She could even drive the kid to school if walking is truly such a burden, and then she'd have the car for the rest of the day. But instead, she wants her sister-in-law to completely rearrange her healthcare job schedule. It's giving main character energy. It's giving my convenience is more important than your career. It's giving I'm going to make my problems everyone else's problems instead of handling basic parenting tasks. And the fact that the brother is backing Rose up on this instead of telling his wife, hey, babe, maybe just walk our kid to school is honestly just disappointing. He should be standing up for his sister here. He should be recognizing that they're already imposing by living in their mom's house for a month and that demanding additional childcare from his sister who works full-time is unreasonable. Instead, he's calling her selfish for not sacrificing her job stability so his wife doesn't have to experience the absolute horror of a 15-minute walk. The entitlement is truly breathtaking. And really gets me? Our writer is clearly a caring person. She's not saying she'll never help with her niece. She's not saying, not my kid, not my problem, and refusing to ever assist. She's just saying she can't commit to every single day because of her work schedule. That's a totally reasonable boundary. If she'd said, hey, I can do Tuesdays and Thursdays when I'm usually on later shifts, or I can help out in emergencies, but not as a regular thing, I bet that would have been fine. But Rose isn't asking for occasional help. She's asking for a daily commitment that would require the writer to fundamentally change her work availability. That's not a small favor. That's not helping out family. That's asking someone to potentially damage their career so you don't have to. Here's my verdict, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. No, you are absolutely not the asshole. Not even a little bit. Not even 1%. You are so far from being the asshole that you can't even see the asshole from where you're standing. Your sister-in-law is being completely unreasonable. Your brother is being unsupportive and honestly kind of a jerk for calling you selfish. And your mom, bless her, tried to guilt trip you, but At least back down when you stood firm. You work in healthcare with irregular shifts. You cannot commit to daily school drop offs without potentially losing hours or your job entirely. That's just reality. And there is a perfectly good alternative solution, walking 15 minutes, that Rose is refusing to do for literally no good reason. Too far to walk with a young child is not a valid excuse for a 15-minute walk with no hills and safe crossings. That's not too far. That's a normal distance that millions of children walk every single day all over the world. Rose needs to put on her big girl pants, lace up some sneakers, and walk her daughter to school. It's really that simple. And your brother needs to stop calling you selfish and maybe examine why he thinks his sister's career should take a back seat to his wife's refusal to engage in basic physical activity. You're doing nothing wrong. Stand your ground. Don't let them guilt trip you into jeopardizing your job. You're already paying rent, doing most of the housework, and working a demanding healthcare job. You don't owe anyone daily childcare on top of all that, especially when there's a completely reasonable alternative available. Not the asshole. Not even close. Am I the asshole for telling friends and family I'm broke when they need money? All right, buckle up everyone, because today's post from r/am I the asshole is absolutely legendary. We've got a 50-year-old man who's been running a decades-long financial catfish operation on his entire family. And honestly, the commitment to the bit is kind of amazing. Let's get into this absolute masterclass of boundary setting. So, our writer is a 50-year-old dude, and he starts this story by taking us back to his 20s. Picture it. Young guy, making decent money, known as a habitual saver, which in your 20s is basically like being a unicorn. Most people in their 20s are eating ramen and wondering if they can afford both Netflix and food this month, but our writer had his finances together. And this is where the problem started, because apparently everyone in his circle knew he had money. Family members knew it, friends knew it. And the second any of them got into financial trouble, they'd come running to him like he was a personal Bank of America. He describes them coming at him with the classic, "Come on, man, I know you got the money." Which, like, first of all, rude. Even if someone does have money, that doesn't entitle you to it. Having money doesn't mean you're a community resource that everyone gets to withdraw from whenever they want. Then he'd get hit with the hard luck sob story, which we all know how those go. Someone's car broke down, someone's rent is due, someone had an unexpected expense, blah, blah, blah. And it always ends with, "I'll pay you back when I get," and then some vague future date that definitely never comes. And here's the thing that really sucks. They either never paid him back at all, or he had to really pressure them to get his money back. So not only was he out the money, but then he became the bad guy for having the audacity to want his own money returned. Anyone who's ever loaned money to family knows exactly how this goes. Suddenly, you're the greedy one for expecting to be paid back. So our guy clearly sat down one day and said, enough is enough, and came up with an absolutely genius plan. He opened up a new bank account, a decoy account, a financial catfish, if you will. He put exactly $20 in the savings, which was the minimum required by the bank, and then he'd put just enough in checking to cover his bills and groceries for that day, and then he'd spend it immediately, so the account only had a few bucks left. This man created a broke person cosplay account. I'm absolutely losing it at the strategic planning here. This is Ocean's 11 level scheming, but for avoiding family members who think you're an ATM. So when people would hit him up for money, he'd pull out the classic, "Sorry, I'd like to help you out, but money's tight right now," which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But of course, they'd call his bluff because they knew he had money. And this is where the plan gets beautiful. He would log into the decoy account and show them. He literally had receipts, except the receipts were fake. Well, not fake, but strategically misleading. This man was out here presenting evidence like he's in court, just showing his practically empty bank account, while his real accounts are somewhere else just vibing with actual money in them. And people would see the empty account and go away all dejected. I'm picturing them sadly walking away like that meme of the guy looking back disappointed. They really thought they were about to get some cash and instead got hit with a bank statement showing $3.47. But wait, it gets better. After a few years of this, because yes, this man committed to the bit for years, people started asking where all his money went because they remembered he used to be financially stable and now his bank account looks like a college student's after paying tuition. And obviously, he can't tell them the truth, which is that his money is chilling in savings accounts, high yield savings accounts. HISA, for those who don't know, basically savings accounts that actually give you decent interest and investments. His money is out there making more money while he's pretending to be broke. So what does he tell them instead? Beer, strip club, casino. This man really looked his family in the eye and said, "Yeah, I spent all my money at the strip club. That's where it went." And they believed him. They fully bought that he'd blown all his savings on beer and gambling, which honestly says a lot about what they do with their money, because he literally says that's what they did, so they just assumed he was doing the same thing. And not only did they believe him, but by the 2010s, we're talking like a decade into this operation, they were lecturing him about not wasting his money. The absolute irony. The people who were constantly asking him for money because they were broke were now giving him financial advice. The same people who never paid him back were telling him he needs to be more responsible. I cannot make this up. This is too good. He even put a laughing emoji here because he was internally cackling every time someone who owed him money was telling him to stop going to casinos. The restraint it must have taken to not burst out laughing in their faces. So in the 2010s, our writer gets married and he fills his wife in on the whole situation. The decoy account, the fake spending stories, all of it. And his wife thought it was hilarious, which honestly is a green flag. If your partner can appreciate a good long-term bit, that's marriage material right there. She understood the assignment and kept the secret. Everything is going great. The operation is running smoothly. Everyone thinks he's broke and irresponsible, and he's living his best financially stable life in peace without people constantly asking him for money. But then, plot twist, his sister came over for Halloween. Just a normal family holiday gathering, probably eating candy, having a good time. And his sister makes a comment about how glad she is that he'd learned to be more responsible with money. She really said, "I'm so proud of you for finally getting your act together," to a man who's been financially responsible this entire time. The audacity. But also, this is exactly what he wanted them to think. So, mission accomplished, I guess? But here's where it all falls apart. His wife starts laughing and spills the beans. The wife really said, "I'm about to blow up this whole operation." After years of this man maintaining this elaborate ruse, his wife just casually outs him at a Halloween gathering. I'm honestly impressed she kept it secret as long as she did, because I would have cracked immediately. The second someone lectured my husband about financial responsibility while he's secretly loaded, I'd be losing it. His sister confronts him, probably feeling all kinds of ways about being fooled for literal decades, and he confirms it's true. The jig is up. The catfish is revealed. The curtain has been pulled back, and then he tells her straight up he's not 20 anymore, and if she hits him up for money, the answer is a hard no, which honestly, good for him. He's setting a clear boundary. No more loans, no more being an ATM, no more being taken advantage of. Just a firm no, which is a complete sentence and doesn't require explanation. His sister then told the rest of the family because of course she did. This tea was too hot not to spill. Can you imagine that family group chat? You guys are not going to believe what I just found out about our brother. And now the family is split. Some people think it's absolutely hilarious because it is, objectively, very funny. This man ran a multi-decade financial deception just to avoid awkward conversations about money. That's commitment. That's dedication. That's honestly kind of impressive, but others think he's a tight-wadded asshole, which is rich coming from people who literally never paid him back the money they borrowed. They're mad that he protected his own finances. They're upset that he didn't let them continue to use him as a personal loan service with no payback required. The cognitive dissonance is wild. Some people have even asked him how much money he has now. They really want to know the exact amount sitting in his accounts. And he gives them the only appropriate response, none of your business. Because it isn't their business. What you have in your bank account is literally nobody's concern except yours, and maybe your spouse's and the IRS. Your sister doesn't need to know. Your cousin doesn't need to know. Your buddy from high school definitely doesn't need to know. But let's talk about why some family members are big mad about this, because their reaction is honestly telling. They're not upset that he lied, or at least that's not the real issue. They're upset because they just realized that all those times they needed money and he said no, he actually could have helped them but chose not to. But here's the thing they're missing. Just because he can help doesn't mean he should or that he's obligated to. Having money doesn't make you responsible for everyone else's financial problems. Being a good saver doesn't mean you owe everyone loans that never get paid back. And let's be real about what was happening in his 20s. People were taking advantage of him. They knew he had money, they knew he was responsible, and they weaponized that against him. Come on, man, I know you got the money is manipulation. It's guilt tripping. It's making him feel bad for having something they want. And when he did loan money, they didn't pay him back, or he had to hound them for it, which makes him look like the bad guy, even though they're the ones who broke their promise. That's not borrowing, that's just taking with extra steps. So he created a system to protect himself and his finances. He set a boundary, a weird, elaborate, slightly dishonest boundary, sure, but a boundary nonetheless. And it worked. For years it worked. He didn't have to deal with awkward conversations, guilt trips, or losing money. People who had no intention of paying him back. The strip club and casino excuse is honestly genius level misdirection. Because once people think you're blowing your money on irresponsible stuff, they stop asking you for it. Who's going to ask for money from someone who they think is going to gamble it away? And the fact that they started lecturing him about it is just the cherry on top. They really fell for it completely. Now, some people might say, but lying to your family is wrong. And okay, sure, honesty is generally good. But also, is it really lying to protect yourself from financial exploitation? He tried the honest route. He loaned money. People didn't pay him back. He had to pressure them for repayment. That didn't work. So he adapted. And it's not like he was hurting anyone with this lie. He wasn't scamming them. He wasn't taking their money. He was just protecting his own. The only thing his deception did was prevent them from taking advantage of him, which they have absolutely no right to do anyway. The wife laughing and spilling the beans is honestly the funniest part of this whole thing. I'm imagining the sister making some comment about responsibility, and the wife just loses it and can't hold it in anymore. After years of watching people lecture her husband about money management while he's actually got his finances on lock, she finally got to reveal the truth. That must have been so satisfying. And can we appreciate that he didn't crack? For years, people were giving him advice about saving money, telling him to be more responsible, probably looking down on him a little bit, and he just took it. He let them think he was financially irresponsible. He played the role convincingly enough that they believed he was spending all his money at casinos. Some serious acting skills. The fact that some family members are now mad and calling him tight-fisted is absolutely ridiculous. These are probably the same people who owed him money back in the day. The same people who would have continued asking him for loans if they'd known he had money. They're not mad he lied. They're mad they can't access his wallet anymore. And asking him how much he has? That's so inappropriate. Imagine asking anyone, hey, how much money do you have in your bank account? That's not normal. That's invasive. The only correct response is exactly what he gave them. None of your business. Here's my verdict, and I'm going to be crystal clear about this. No, you are not the asshole. Not even a little bit. You are the opposite of the asshole. You're a financial genius who figured out how to protect yourself from saw you as a resource to exploit rather than a person with your own financial goals. You tried doing things the right way. You long expected repayment and got burned multiple times. So you adapted and found a solution that worked for you. Was it unconventional? Sure. Was it a little deceptive? Yeah. But was it necessary to protect your financial stability and mental peace? Absolutely. Your family and friends are mad because they just realized they can't manipulate you anymore. They can't use the "come on, I know you have it" line. They can't guilt trip you. They can't treat you like a bank. And that's a them problem, not a you problem. The people calling you tight-fisted are showing their true colors. They feel entitled to your money, which is wild. They think you should have continued letting them borrow money they had no intention of paying back. They're mad you set a boundary, even if that boundary was dressed up as fake financial irresponsibility. Stand your ground. Keep telling them it's none of their business. Keep saying no when they ask for money. You worked hard, you saved smart, and you don't owe anyone access to the fruits of your labor. And honestly, the fact that you committed to this bit for literal decades is kind of iconic. You really said, I'm going to pretend to be broke for the rest of my life, and then did it. The dedication is unmatched. Not the asshole, not even close. You're a legend.